Hello, welcome to my second presentation. I'm going to talk about today project management methodologies. There are three methodologies which I am going to consider: Prince2, Agile and Waterfall methodologies. The main area of a project management, before I talk about the comparison, I'll talk about a little bit what is the purpose of the methods, how, what are really the reasons for that. The aim of a project is the production and development of a product or a service, and this product and services requires management, control of a methodology, and this methodologies really shows what needs to be really required for the planning, the organizing, and the controlling of the process of producing these products and services. In here, Prince2, a methodology, it is a project management started in the UK, and it really is used internationally. It provides a framework. As I said, all the project management aims is to produce a sort of planning, organizing, and controlling of the production of the product or the services which are given by the scope of that development of the product or the services. So compared to what happens in Prince2, is that Prince2 has got its own principles that guide it through it. So the next one, which we're going to talk about, is Agile. This is a project management approach. It really emphasizes flexibility, work collaboration between the people who are really producing the product and the services and the people who are really using that product or the service, systems users. These are produced through the collaboration of the stakeholders in here. So you might really consider that the users are part of the designer's team. They collaborate with that. So the Agile is a much more a flexible approach. What it means is that the scope and the quality and the performance of the product or the service produced is flexible, that users might really change the specification, what they really require. So in that case, Agile is a much more flexible, collaborative works. Okay, and in here as well, it really fundamentally do exactly the same as like Prince2. There is a planning, organizing, and controlling of the projects, but that is dependent on the change in requirements is accommodated by the Agile project management model. The third one, which I'm going to talk about, is this is a much more traditional way of managing a project. This is what we call waterfall project. This is a sort of based on a linear sequential project management. What it means is the specification, what we're really gonna aiming to produce, is well defined, and all the stages from the beginning to the end is planned, and each stage have got a very clear defined product outputs, where the first it is done through a process of that after completing the first stage goes to the second stage, so on and so forth. So this is a sort of the traditional approach where the specification does really not change that much. These are fixed compared to the agile, and this is the key element in here is that the agile is compared to the waterfall methodology, where the agile is for normally software production, and the waterfall is a much more traditional. Even though those three project management can really be used for different projects, they have their own strengths and weaknesses in here, and the agile is a much more flexible. The Prince 2 we're going to have a look at in terms of the detail of it. The similarity between these three project management is that the planning, organizing, and controlling a project is similar. They have that approach that you have to really control all three elements. So all these project management can be really used for complex projects in terms of producing the products on time and within the budget. The difference is that Prince 2 is a more formal and structured approach than Agile or Waterfall. So what it does is it really defines roles and responsibilities. So it requires a close monitoring of the project's key factors like cost, time, scope, quality, and performance of the product or the service you really aim to be produced in the project. So these are the format. The agile is, in other words, is a much more flexible, as I said, and then the collaborative things. This is less rigid compared to Prince 2 and Waterfall. What makes it less rigid is there is a continuous changes of specification from users, which means the continuous changes of that specification. Sometimes it changes the scope, it changes the quality or the performance of the product or the services, whereby Agile can adjust to that requirement, that where it really brings that flexibility of the method itself. And it is collaborative in such a way that the system producers, the designers, the producers of the product constantly consult with users of the systems, and they take the users' feedback, whereby after users looked at the product, they suggested what really needs to be done to change, or how it can really be improved, or what other facilities need to be included in that product or services. It would be suggested by the users, which is really accommodated by the teams. So the Prince 2 is really much more flexible and collaborative. Whereas the waterfall is a linear sequential approach. What it means is you have to really complete the first stage before you go to the second stage, so on and so forth. So it is what happens is it is not really adaptable to change compared to the agile. It's less adaptable than Prince 2, and or agile. Is well suited for projects that are not really subject to changes in specification, whereas the agile are more suited for changes of specification. So the Prince 2 principles or approaches are that there must be a sort of clearly defined the goal of the product or the service. What is really the trying to achieve? So the scope really tells us to what degree this product or services really encompasses. What it doesn't include, what it includes, will be defined in there. So that defined clearly shows us what are the deliverables and who are really the stakeholders who are really using that systems or products. So based on that, it creates a detailed plan. That detailed plan most depends on the product breakdown. So you have a product. At the end, you define what that product is, and that product will be broken down from the in stages, and those stages will really gives us what we required as work breakdown structure, which we're gonna look at on part 3 of the presentation. I'm gonna present regarding these two interlinked elements. And when a really product is produced, it has got parts. All these parts will break it down in terms of it. It is for a top-down approach of breaking down products, and the work breakdown structure really is a way or the approach which really starts from bottom-up approach, where each element is from the top starts building what kinds of work need to be. That work package will be created for a team or for individual to complete it. In that way, it really creates that planning is looking at that in terms of how the product is really broken down, what is the work package is for each element. So that gives us in terms of the planning of it. In that planning, you might really consider what the tasks which need to be completed, which tasks really need to be done together in parallel, or what tasks really requires to be completed before you really start the next one. Once you really break down get the work breakdown structure, in that work breakdown structure it tells you exactly the tasks required, and that task really tells you exactly the identification of the skills and knowledge set required to complete that tasks. And so the third stages in terms of Prince 2 is that will give at who can actually do the tasks, what kinds of roles in terms of skill sets really required in there. So once we really get that, now we have got the elements, the total costs of the product in there. What it means is we know exactly who is really participating. We know exactly what kinds of product is going to be produced. In that, it really gives us the total required resources for the project. In here, principles, we will see later on in terms of the requirements, in terms of the justifications of the project itself. Once we really get these resources, we have to really compare it to the benefit we're really getting from the product or the service we're producing. And then we're going to compare these two. Okay, so what the point in here is the benefits which we're going to get from these product or services should exceed the cost which is really incurred to produce it. So in here, once we really get the resources requirement, we know exactly how much it's going to cost in terms of the whole project. And then what happens is now that the plan and the design of now the product, we're going to go all that in terms of the design, the solution which we bring us, which is really part of that the product breakdown structure that gives us this is the solution, this is how we're going to build the systems. And then that with the planning, the resources, what we're going to do is implement the solution, start producing the product or the services. Once that is really producing, what we're going to do is implement the solution. So we have the product now, we have the services ready to be implemented. But before they implement the solution, we have to go through testing, extensive testing of the product or services. So is it the scope has been achieved? Is this the deliverables are what we're really expecting? Is the quality level of the product or the performance of the product is as expected, as defined in stage 1 at the beginning, whereby we really clearly define that goals, deliverables, and the scope of, of the product and the service has been achieved in here in terms of it. Once that the test is validated, yes, this is what we were really were trying to, our expectation have been met. This is what we aim to produce. This is what we started really our goal and aim is completely achieved. And then what happens is now we really goes into deploying the solution that includes training staff to use the systems effectively, and then we have to really set out in terms of deploy the solution and maintain and support the solution, and then at the end close the product. So this is a sort of a structured, process-driven approach, okay, to project management, and emphasize on a clear roles and responsibilities, reflective communication, rigorous project control. I'm gonna really see a little bit more into it, because Prince2 includes really identifying the risks. Remember that the product breakdown, when you really do, what are the risks that will not be able to achieve that product to the required quality or performance. So those risks will be integrated in here. For those risks, we're gonna really do sort of mitigating measures. Although those mitigating measures requires planning in their own right. So if this happens, this is the process and the procedures we're gonna follow. So we're gonna cover that later on. Now, let's go to the principles of Prince2. What the principles of Prince2? It has got 7 principles. The first one is a sort of continued business justification. What does it actually really mean? I was talking about the comparison of cost and benefits of that product we're really producing. Yes, as we really progress through the project, we have continuously justify the business case. What it means is you might really costs might not really be in your control. You're buying staff, equipment, the cost might really be tripled. In that case, is your benefit and your cost is still justifiable? Is the cost is too high to the product you're producing? So that is what it really means, that you have to really justify the continuation of the project based on the comparison between the benefit of the product compared to the cost to produce it. The second one is the learn from experience. In Prince2, once you really completed the project, you document your experience, your reflection, your methods, and then your methods to produce that product or services. You're gonna really question whether that is the best method, the best tool which you have used. Can that really be improved? So what happens is now, once you really documented that, you produce what we call is a sort of a knowledge base. This knowledge base is a key element for training a new project managers in terms of starting up, how to really do things, in terms of how to compare benefits to costs, and how to compare the methods used in terms of producing the product or services. So Learn from experience is the second principles of Prince 2. The third one is Prince 2 is heavily dependent on defines roles and responsibility. Who is really responsible for the project management team? Who is really responsible for the people who are really producing the product or the services? Okay, in terms of what happens when the budget is really exists to what, to who is really in terms of looking after the interest of the stakeholders. So you define the roles and responsibilities in terms of who is responsible for that and how we're going to really manage that. The next principle is the production is really managed by stages. So each stage will be well defined, and each stage is really in terms of the planning, the costs, what really need to be produced at that stage is well defined. So in that case, what happens is this is a sort of a point at the creation of these products whereby you measure. What it means is you're monitoring the progress of it, and and then you really find out exactly how much it costs, what percentage of the production has been completed. So this is a sort of the monitoring and controlling stage whereby you really say, yeah, we most probably need to adjust. I'm going to talk about the project management triangle in terms of if the cost exceeded at that stage, are we going to reduce the quality of the product or the performance or the scope of it? How do we really manage that? Okay, so there are three elements we're going to have a look at. In total, there are about 6 elements that we're going to have a look at it that are major factors in managing projects. The fifth principle is manage by exception. So the project management team should really empowered to make a decision within a defined limit. The project manager really will have a responsibility and manages by exception. If this happens, this is the responsibility of the team. If this happens, this is the responsibility of the project manager to make a decision. If the cost exceed by a certain amount, it is only the board of the project which make really a decision whether to continue the production of the continuation of the project itself. Okay, so this is sort of managing by exception. So it is focused on products. So what it means is the purpose of it is the production of that product or services. So it has to really focus on the producing the product or the services as defined at the first stages. The next one is there are always projects, with big projects, small projects, and Prince 2 really gives you to be able to really manage irrespective of the size of the project. What it really means is the project management environment can be tailored to fit small or large projects. So these are what I'm talking about, the time, cost, and quality are the what we call it the project management triangle. So in this triangle, when what increases in terms of the cost, the time required most probably increases, or the quality of the product reduces. So what happens is, this is, as a project manager, the main role is managing these constraints effectively. So this is how you really manage in terms of this trade-off. If you really reduces quality, what are you really? You are really reducing the scope of the product, and you are really increasing the quality, the time, the cost. This is where you really manage the three element of it. So at the beginning, excuse me, at the beginning, what you're really doing is that the we are define the project as that we're gonna complete the project at the, it will take this amount of time, it's gonna cost this much, and we're gonna produce it with this quality. And so once it is really defined, that is the triangle, which is really, so one, if it really exceeds, what it means is, hey, the quality which we really assume not really satisfactorily achieved, that might really increases the cost, because the quality really, the higher quality you really want to produce, that really brings the cost higher than that. So this is a sort of a trade-off for managing the constraints effectively. And so it requires a careful planning, communication, and effective risk management. So these are what I was talking about in terms of risks. It has to be really documented, planned for effective management to complete the project. The waterfall project management is a linear sequential project management. This is just once we define really the product or the services in terms of the deliverables and the scopes. We plan from the beginning to the end. So that is what we call it defining the project. So once it is goals and objectives are defined, deliverables we know exactly, and the stakeholders, we go to the develop the project plan. These project plans are a series of plans in terms of stages. We only just continue to really do after finishing one stage, follow to the next one. And to do that, what happens is now once we really produce the plan, we assemble the project team and then secure the necessary resources. Once we do that, the plan and design the solution, what it means is now we have the deliverables. This is what we want to produce. Now, how do we really going to produce that product or services? So in here, we design the solution. This is how we're going to produce it. So in terms of once that is really produced, we implement the solution and test and validate. This is almost similar to Prince2. Implementing the solution, test and validate, and then we're going to deploy the solution. Once we're deploying, we roll out the products, train the staffs, all the necessary, produce the necessary manuals for users, for maintenance engineers, and then maintain and support the solution. And so we're gonna create maintenance manual, we train staff, and then we close the project. So the agile project management really follows something similar in terms of defining the project. This is clearly define the goals and objectives of the project, as well as the scope, deliverable, and stakeholders. But this is a much more flexible methodology. So you're gonna really, once you really define this is what we're gonna produce, you assemble the project team. So identify the skills and expertise needed to complete the project and bring together a team of individuals to work on the projects. So you're gonna start, this is a little bit now different. You involve stakeholders, users, system users, and then you're gonna really start planning in terms of prioritizing. What should we really produce first that the user can actually test and have a look at what the systems really does? So it is you produce a bare systems whereby things can be tested. So this is a sort of a methodology which advocates iteration of producing the product. You produce something, you taste it, you allow users to taste it, and then if they are really happy, you start build on it. So the once you plan and prioritize the work, the iteration to deliver really started. So this is a sort of a rapid iteration to complete the tasks. So once you really deliver that, you go to the next one. Before you go to the next one, what happens is you review and reflect. So the review and the reflect this is the involvement of um, the involvement of the stakeholders, the users. They look at it. And then what happens is now, based on their input, you adopt and change. You adopt and change to make adjustments to project plan. What happens is now, this is you're bringing a sort of a change of specifications. Yeah, this is really, we like this product, but can you really add another functionality to the systems? We need really to have our customers to use A, B, and C. So what happens is now A, B, and C were not defined at the beginning, but this is an additional requests from the customers that comes about because of the review and the reflection between producers, systems producers or system designers, and system users. So this is you adopt and adjust and make adjustments and go through the iteration process, and then after that iteration processes you go to review and reflect again. But once you're really satisfied, once the customers are really satisfied with the product and services, what it means is this result comes about after a certain iteration. You develop it, you tested it, you review it, you change specification, you go back to the iteration and to deliver what is really asked for. So you constantly adjusting that until your customers, yes, we're really satisfied with this product, you can use it now. So in there, once that is really produced, then you close the project. Okay, remember the users are really continuously testing it, using it, but at the end you have to really produce all the documentation required for training the staff members and producing maintenance manuals and all the rest of it. But this is a sort of unique in terms of the agile project management is there is an ongoing planning, adaptation and collaboration between the producers, systems producers and customers. Though there is, this is the scope, the specification is really tends to change frequently depending on the user requirement. Okay, thanks very much for listening.